Hello and welcome everyone to TEDxDupreeParkTV. I'm Gina Carr, your host, and I'm delighted to be here today. And I hope that you are delighted to be here today. Please let us know in the comments where you're coming in from today, and let us know where you're watching from. Are you on Facebook? Are you on YouTube? Are you on Twitter? Because of technology, we're able to stream simultaneously to all of these different channels, which is really fantastic. And we're the TEDx Dupree Park show. This is related to the TEDx Dupree Park event that was going to happen in Woodstock, Georgia in 2020. It was our very first time, but we got a little derailed because of COVID. And so we're making other plans and going virtual and doing the TV show and doing other things to keep our wise people out into the world. So today we're going to be joined by a lot of our, what we call our sages, our wise sages, folks who are going to share their wisdom with you, our audience. And as they share, and as you have thoughts about it, just share in the comments. Please let us know what you're thinking and what you'd like to ask them, because we can feature your comments here on our StreamYard broadcast right here. All right, so with that, I'm going to bring on my co-host, Steve Monahan. He is the organizer for TEDx Dupree Park, and he's the one who has made this all possible. So let's see. There you are, Steve, coming all the way from Canton, Georgia?
Canton, Georgia. Woodstock, Georgia, Canton, Georgia.
Yeah, you're right there on the border.
Yeah.
You take one step that way, you're in Woodstock. One step the other way, you're in Canton.
Yep.
Okay, well, what's on your mind today? I know you're always doing a lot of thinking. We both studied the Stoics a lot. And I tell you, Stoicism is a great philosophy for our day to day, right?
Yeah, it is.
Things that are going on in the world.
Yeah. I also study the Eastern philosophies and the Far Eastern philosophy, Far Eastern Hindu, the Eastern Tao Te Ching, things like that. It just puts things in perspective. They're not religions; they're philosophies of how to live your life. And when you tie that into Stoic, it makes sense. That kind of fits in with yesterday. I try to keep up with everything that's going on with TED and TEDx weekly, almost daily. And it was kind of interesting yesterday. There was an interview with Ray Dalio. He is a philanthropist now. He just donated $7 million worth of equipment to some hospitals. And he's really a thought leader, and he has studied economies going back to whenever the first economy. And, we're living in strange times now. There's fear, there's hope, there's worry. And you know what? But these things have all happened before. I was mentioning to you, watching a series, Downton Abbey. And they were in the beginning of the 1900s, just like we're in the beginning of the 2000s. And the whole world was changing then. They kept, the aristocrats that losing the castles and all that. And industrial revolution was coming along. And it's similar now. We have the technology revolution. There's a change going on in the wealth gaps. Everything there led up to World War II. But the economy's changed and there was so much happening. But they got through it. And, we came in the 50s and 60s and we had wonderful times. So, the good times will be back. But we have to be real. And that's part of what we're doing with the show here. Just like TED, we are very uplifting. We're looking for great ideas to make this a better world. But we're dealing with the reality. We're not covering everything up. That, the most important way to be successful is you start off with the basis of what's real and what's not. And once you know reality, then you can adjust from there. So we're trying to bring shows that deal with the reality of the COVID, of the economy, of what's going on with the planet, the ecology, commerce, all those things. But we're trying to also do it with solutions and an uplifting solution. because there is always a solution, no matter what the problem. But you have to face it and look at it real. And so that's what I've been focusing on. I'm glad to see that TED is focusing on the same thing. And their conversation is they were worried about their own venues that they put on and how would they get sponsors and how could they shift. But they've learned, just as we've learned, going into a virtual world, there's so much more that we could do and create even larger communities. They gave an example of they had Ray Dalio. Normally it would take a year to book him. Well, doing a virtual one, they booked him in two visits. The same thing with some of the other people that you would have a hard time getting, and we're experiencing that ourselves. So I really want to emphasize that's what these shows are about. And people listening, we're not sugarcoating anything. And we're talking about the problems, the fears. We're talking about mental illness, those things that we've talked about on some of our shows, and suicide. But we're also talking about plant-based eating and how that's going to change things. So that's what these shows are about. We really encourage people to listen in. We're thinking outside the box, and we've created a much bigger community had it been just one physical event. So that's what I'd like to share.
Well, yes, I'm so excited by what we're doing and the exposure that we're able to give these great ideas. They all go along with our theme of seeding greatness. So how do we seed greatness throughout the world and get these ideas out there? And exactly, we could only have a limited number of people on our physical stage, but we can have a lot more people on our weekly show. And so one of those that we're going to be presenting today is a renowned doctor that I am just very excited to introduce to you guys. So Dr. Anthony Orsini is a practicing physician. He's an author and a frequent speaker on the topic of compassionate communication in medicine and business. He's the level 2 medical director of one of the largest neonatal intensive care units in the world, and he serves as chief of patient experience and palliative care liaison for the neonatal practice. In 2011, he founded the Orsini Way. It's a company that provides communication training to healthcare and business professionals. He's authored several papers on the topics of communication in medicine, enhancing the patient experience, and delivering tragic news. He's the author of the recently published book titled It's All in the Delivery, Improving Healthcare, Starting with a Single Conversation. He's a frequent keynote speaker at medical and business events, including an upcoming TEDx. And he's going to be talking about improving healthcare starts with a single conversation. His weekly podcast is Difficult Conversations, Lessons I Learned as an ICU Physician, and it hit the top 100 podcast of Apple in just 1 week. So with that, let's bring on Dr. Orsini. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, it's nice to finally meet you. How are you? I'm honored to be here.
Oh boy, well, we're just delighted to have you, and we can certainly hear that podcast sounding voice. You've done the right things to get your audio right and to get that deep resonance. How did you get a podcast to reach the top 100 in just the very first week?
Well, I was very blessed. I had this idea. A lot of people urged me to go ahead and start this podcast. I knew it was going to be a lot of work, and I wanted to make sure that I did it correctly. So I took a lot of time to make sure it was prepared. But really, I really owe all the credit to the guests that I've been able to get. I just facilitate just as you're doing here, but we've had some great names, and it's a topic I think that everyone's interested in because we all have difficult conversations in life, and it may be with our spouse. You don't have to be a physician. It really, a large part of my audience is HR professionals and business leaders. And so the whole concept of the show is that every day there's a difficult conversation that we have to navigate, and that most things that are going to be very substantial in our life starts out with that difficult conversation. So I think it's a topic that just appeals to everyone. So I've been really, really blessed. And once it hit the top Apple 100 in medicine, I was very happy because it was so much easier to get even better and better guests. And it just keeps going on and on. So I've been very, very blessed.
Yeah, that is an amazing thing. And it's not easy to do one. It's not easy to write a book either, is it?
No,
the book goes into it more than people think.
Oh, yes. It took a couple of years to write that book. It was really a compilation of all the workshops that I give, both to medicine and in business. But I've been doing this for 10 years. So you have all these ideas in your mind and you think, oh, I could just sit in front of this desk and I could just write for a couple of weeks and it'll pop out. But it's not that easy. There's editors and formatters and changes. So it took a couple of years, but I'm pretty proud of it. And it's also doing pretty well.
Yeah, well, good for you.
Thank you.
I was looking at your background material, and you coach people, medical doctors and staff. And the one thing that jumped out at me that you coach them, what was it? That how to build instant rapport and trust. And could you give me an example of 3 things that you could do to build that instant rapport? And if you look up the definition of rapport, it's building, people getting together, understanding, trusting one another, caring about one another. And it's such a impactful word. We don't seem to have rapport with each other anymore on a grander scale. But in the doctor's office, how do you get them to get their staff to understand the importance of that? So give us like 3 examples of how it's done.
Yeah, great question. You build rapport easily with people that you have something in common. And especially in today's climate, what I teach everyone in the staff and people in business is that no matter what your background is, no matter what your race or your color, your ethnicity, you have something in common with everyone. And for physicians, when you walk into a room to meet somebody, and this has been studied, that you can build a relationship in 56 seconds. And for a physician, the most important thing that I tell them is you don't build rapport by asking questions. You don't build rapport by being, at an upper level. Sometimes physicians think that, we have to show that we're the expert in the room. Patients know you're the expert in the room. You're the doctor. We build rapport by finding commonality. And so we teach you how to scan the room. I'm very, very big on teaching nonverbal language. Find something in common. But here's the key. Be a genuine person. And that builds rapport instantly. So walking into a patient's room or walking up to somebody in a party, for that instance, and sharing something personal about yourself. It could be a nurse walking into a patient's room at a hospital saying, boy, I had a rough time this morning. My 5-year-old just wouldn't go to kindergarten today. Or, yesterday I had a rough day because my daughter's sick. That makes you a genuine person. It makes you all of a sudden real, because the person who's sitting on the other side of the desk or the examination table, they also have their problems. They also have their everyday lives. And so sometimes I'll walk into the room and I'll see a New York Yankees hat. I'm from New Jersey. You're from the Yankees. We don't need to start right away with, hi, I'm Dr. Orsini and I'm your doctor today. What could I do for you? Just spend less than a minute on being a genuine person. So you build rapport by finding commonality and being a genuine person, and also giving somebody your uninterrupted attention. You see so many doctors right now, they're typing notes, they're working on their electronic medical records, or they're writing things down. So if I come into a room, whether it's a physician and patient interaction, whether it's an interaction at a social gathering, whether it's an HR professional with talking to an employee or teammate, I could just come in there and sit there, be a genuine person, give them your undivided attention, use friendly body language, and right away there's your rapport. And so that's, in a quick nutshell, that's how you can build rapport. And I teach doctors all the time. It doesn't take a long time to do this. You can do it in a minute. And in fact, in a day where we're worried about being efficient in medicine, it's so important to be able to build that rapport. And it makes it even harder now that we're doing telehealth visits, but it can be done by just using the right body language. So if I could teach people how to build rapport through nonverbal language, I'm halfway there.
Doctor, what you're talking about resonates with me so well. I manage money for a living. And one of the things that I've had to learn to do is how to have these conversations and build rapport. I'm essentially a left brain introvert, so making that transition was pretty difficult. One of the questions that I have for you, I have a family member who, she thinks she's the smartest person in the room and has a way of elevating things to an unreasonable level. What kind of techniques could you offer us to de-escalate situations like that, particularly in the medical community?
Well, I think being a real person, I teach this acronym called program, and the G is for genuine, but being a genuine person, as I mentioned before. But if you have somebody who's kind of up there, very hard to get along with, humor, it works great. And if you show them that you are not intimidated by them, if you show them that you are a real person, you're already intelligent. We know that. So you could hold your own in an intelligent conversation. Right now, the problem in the world right now is that we resort to, and I'm going off the path on conflict resolution, but we resort to name calling right away. Yeah. And I was always taught the first person who calls a name loses the debate, because that's what you do when you don't know what to say. But so humor goes a long way. Be a genuine person. When I have some really difficult conversations with, sometimes I have to speak to physicians who are been referred to me because they're not doing so well with their patient experience and they don't want to be there, but spend 2 or 3 minutes, make a joke, stroke their ego a little bit, and before you know it, you're leading them to the water just like you would, and they're doing what you want them to do.
Oh, very good. I appreciate it so much. It's in my practice, and I learned a long time ago, I read a book actually by a doctor, I can't remember his name, but was talking about the nature of my business, your business, attorneys. It's called a practice because we practice and we get better each and every day by practicing our particular expertise. And it was somewhat of a mindset shift for me.
Yeah, learning communication, just like learning medicine, is a lifelong. I'm still learning. I still get things wrong, but I'm fascinated by both. So it's never work when you're so fascinated about learning.
Well, very good. We appreciate you so much being on our show today. And
thank you so
I
much
look forward to getting your book, because you can never learn too much about how to massage and manage difficult communications, because it happens in every walk of life, in every profession, and in every relationship. So thanks. I look forward to getting a copy.
Well, great. Thank you so much.
Anthony, I was thinking about it. You actually are doing what we are doing at TED. You're communicating and you're sharing ideas. I mean, we're on the same page. We're speakers, we're sharing ideas. And that is, so important. Let me just ask you, my story is a few years, about 10 years back now. I was given a few months to live and wound up surviving.
Wow.
But 3 years of getting up to that, I went from every doctor, specialist, probably in Atlanta and all around. And the same thing was consistent. I would go in there and they would walk in. They wouldn't look me in the eye. They wouldn't stop for a second. They just go right into it without building any type of a rapport. And I always just felt like I knew there was a difference between us, but there wasn't as big a difference as they thought. But they seemed to act like there was this big difference. Is it some way, I don't mean to insult anybody, but is it some way that the science or the medical profession is wired a little different? I'm more wired to have eye contact, to walk in, sit down for a second, breathe, look at the person, and then a conversation starts. But they just don't seem to do that. Is it part of the training? Is it just, are they trying to keep it on a different level? Why does that happen all the time? It's consistently happened to me.
It's a great question. And the answer is twofold. One is no one if you're not trained in something, then you're not going to be comfortable in it. And if you're not comfortable doing it, then you're going to rush through it. Okay. So when you're in an uncomfortable situation, like a physician is, we often resort to where we're comfortable, and we're comfortable in the science. We haven't been trained on communication. Until the Orsini way came around, there really was no company that was out there teaching doctors and nurses how to build that rapport. So secondly, we 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, we picked doctors strictly by a formula. This is what you get on your MCAT board scores. This is what you have for your grade point average. If you get over this number, you get into medicine. But nobody looked at, and still rarely looks at, the ability of that person to communicate. Is that person a real person? So you're taking people who very well may be communication challenged to begin with, And then you're not teaching them that, and you're making them, and you're putting them in a situation that they're not comfortable. And so what would you do if you're in a situation not comfortable? You're not going to make eye contact. And we as human beings report to where we're comfortable. And we are comfortable as physicians in going into the science. So we put our heads down, in the chart. We talk to we talk to you without looking and making eye contact. But I got to tell you, doctors want to be good at this. And that's the great thing about my training, is that once you teach them how to do it, they realize how important that is. They light up. They get excited. I can use this. Patient experience scores is really big in medicine right now. And they want to do well, but they haven't been taught how to do that. And so that's why I wrote the book. That's why my TED Talk is starting with a single, improving healthcare, starting with a single conversation. That single conversation is the 1 minute that you and I speak that builds that rapport. And once we do that, we know that when you have a relationship with your doctor, that you are more likely to take your medicine, you are more likely to follow the therapeutics, you're more likely to follow up, and you have a better outcome. That's amazing that we can fix all that just by teaching a doctor and a nurse to communicate. And by the way, it's the same when I teach HR professionals or I teach business leaders. It's the same concepts. A good leader is somebody who creates loyalty. I had on my podcast just yesterday, I interviewed, it didn't air yet, Stephen Covey from Speed of Trust, and he talks about the same thing. Good leaders know how to build rapport, and they know how to create loyalty and trust.
So you said you interviewed someone from the Stevie Covey organization. What was the person's name?
No, I interviewed Stephen M.R. Covey, the author of Speed of Trust, and he'll be on my podcast. He's the author, the son of Stephen Covey, who wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But Stephen M.R. Covey is also a best-selling author twice, and really has been an amazing guy. And he really talks about how trust and building rapport. And he'll probably be on my podcast in about a month.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I can't wait to hear that. Well, you've shared a lot with us already. Before we let you go, is there anything else that you didn't get to share yet that you want to make sure that our audience hears before we let you go?
The final thing I would say to you is just really be more aware of your communication and demand that people from your healthcare and from your business that they communicate. We call it compassionate communication. And you could always reach me through my website. It's up there, theorsiniway.com. I'll answer any of your questions. And please go to my, every week you learn something from my podcast. So please go ahead and visit me there also and subscribe.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this, and I'm a big podcast listener, so I definitely will be tuning in.
Fantastic.
And what an important skill that you're teaching people, and it's just so needed in our world, especially today.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and good luck with your TEDx.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day.
Okay. Oh boy, that was so inspiring, and just love meeting all these folks that are seeding greatness throughout the world. And with that, let's bring on our next guest. We're filled with these brilliant people today, and our next guest. It's not hard to find a consultant, and it's not that hard to find a psychologist. But find a consulting psychologist, that's a little more rare, but it can be found. And that's our very next guest. It's Dr. Les Kertay, and he's a consulting psychologist with the vision, insight, and level of engagement and presence to create solutions for business problems. And so he brings these traits, a wealth of knowledge, wealth of experience, different areas of business, and his knowledge of human behavior and personal dynamics to help you optimize your group, your team, your leadership to create and sustain growth. So with that, let's bring on Dr. Kertay and let's learn from him. Welcome aboard. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
Well, your work is quite interesting, and I can see that it's helping you seed a lot of greatness throughout the world. Tell us a little bit more about your activities.
Well, it's two things that, one that's a follow-up really to what we've just been listening to, which is that, my tagline is the power of presence. And to me, one of the most important skills that sometimes gets lost is that part of connecting with others is really being there, is just showing up. and being comfortable inside your own skin and inside the relationship with another person. I think that's, gets you 80% of the way there. And it's something we've lost sight of a little bit. There are a lot of reasons for that, but I think it makes a huge difference. Lately, what I've been especially interested in is the process of aging and aging well, and about 6 or 7 years ago, as I was 7 years ago, as I was getting ready to turn 60, I sort of started thinking about this idea that there was a time not that long ago when, you're turning 60, you're in a corporate role, you're thinking, I'm going to retire in 5 years and putter around for a while and play with grandchildren, and that'll be that. But what I realized is I'm going to live another 20 or 30 years, and is what I'm doing now what I want to be doing for the rest of my life? And I started talking with people about that, and I realized that that really resonated. Lately, I realized that it's not just about what you're going to do for work. I think at a certain point we get to the place where we become more about who we are than what we have, and more about what we're going to leave and how we're going to make the world a better place. And so that's kind of my current idea, is that I think that there are ways in which we can age that actually makes the world better. And that was what attracted me to being with you guys today, was this notion of seeding greatness. We just don't lose sight of that.
That's a powerful message, and it's really timely. I mean, we've got a lot of boomers. Myself, I'm an early boomer. Right. Dealing with that. And just a quick example, I was a corporate executive my whole career. And then at 53, I left it. And, through the illness and that. And I had to re-find my identity, because my whole identity was being an executive, being the head of the household and having to do this. And when I didn't have that, I almost I did for a period of time. I went through a depression because I didn't know who I was anymore. I couldn't figure it out. I just wasn't right. And now I see people going through that thing, and they think it's them, but it's just the whole shift, because our whole ego was tied up into it. And I wound up going into, as you say, finding who you are. I started a nonprofit. I started a food pantry for people feeding their pets. What is the connection between a corporate executive for Fortune 100 and goes into, setting up a food pantry? I know the people there thought I was, poor guy, he's lost it. And now I'm in my 70s, and I'm moving, and I'm starting last year a TEDx. People generally just don't do that. But your message is so important. The genius is still in all of us.
That's right.
Just because you're not working anymore, it means you got your whole life ahead of you. What the hell you want to do? So Is that what you do? You try to get that message across to people?
Well, my current project, I'm actually calling Fourth Quarter Happiness. It's what I realized in the last years is that in addition to being able to help people become more productive, what I realized is that I think I've learned some things about how to help people be more present with themselves and reconnect with what we wanted to accomplish when we were younger and sort of gave up on. And often it's not about, as you say, it's not about, doing a particular thing or being in a particular, achieving some corporate success. It's really about getting in touch with who you want to be and how you want to be in the world, and how you want to make it a better place. And so that's my current interest, is really building a project that with classes and with a membership group, and really appealing to people who are going through the process you're describing, and how we can help each other to become really more ourselves, right? It's not becoming somebody else, it's becoming who we are.
Yeah, right. You know, and I could see not only for those that have in their 60s, but, you know, there's a lot of kids that got out of college now, and they don't know what they want. They're very confused. Right. And then there's a lot of people that were in the military, and they get out and they don't know what they want. And you get those that were in industrial for years in the Rust Belts or whatever, and they're not there. And so they're taking opioids because they don't know what to do. So, I mean, it's a huge world. You got me to think about that. It doesn't have to be just one group. There's so many people, so many groups in this. I like what you do. I mean, that's really cool.
Thank you.
Really good stuff. Keep at it.
I will. I appreciate it.
Go ahead, jump in, Mike.
I got to say, the fourth quarter of happiness, or fourth quarter happiness, what a great tagline and what a great message. Certainly in my business, many of my clients are nearing or in retirement, and how we still maintain our purpose and our place in life. It's a big deal. And I do appreciate so much what you're doing. I did read several of your blogs. You're a terrific storyteller. I love how you use stories to try to communicate some of these ideas. But if I may, I'd like to pivot just a little bit and talk about the 6 kids, the 4 dogs, the 3 cats, and what your house must be like. As a younger man, I wanted to have 6 kids, 4, 5, 6 kids. I never did. I had one. I'm grateful for the one I have, but tell us a little bit more about what that was like, and some of the lessons that you've learned about happiness.
Wow. You know, I'll tell you, the first thing that comes to mind is I just recently read that Ruth Bader Ginsburg said that the secret to a happy marriage is developing selective hearing and a selective memory. You know, for me, I have been blessed to be really successful in education. I've had a really, really good career. And it sounds trite to say that I did it for my family, but the truth is that was always in the back of my mind, that was the most important thing I could do for the world. Talking about seeding change. I mean, I have the opportunity to do that myself, but hopefully I've been part of helping to raise children who can also do that. And that's just a huge thing. We called our house Shea Chaos.
I did see that.
But you know, if you can be present in the midst of chaos, you can be present anywhere. That's sort of my thought about it.
That's well said. And like I said, getting back to what you do with raising kids, and how certainly when I was married and raising my son, it was a big part of my life. It's what really gave me purpose beyond business, beyond anything else. I tell you, when my son was born, it completely changed the way I viewed life and my role in it. Now that he's up and out, it's changed again a little bit. So once again, we're always revisiting this notion of happiness and purpose and what's the next step. And at 58 years old, I completely changed direction and got into financial planning and money management. It's been the most fun I've ever done, but it is by far the hardest thing I've ever done. And somewhat along the same lines as you and Dr. Orsini, making those connections and helping people make the most of what they have. So
absolutely,
we thank you for being on the show and sharing your seeds of wisdom. What I'll leave you with too is I boated on the Tennessee River for a number of years. I love Chattanooga. It's a great place to be. It would probably be number 2 or 3 on my list if I were to leave the north side of Atlanta. You've been in Chattanooga a number of years, I gather, 20 some odd.
I moved here in 1997 from
Okay.
Atlanta. I escaped Atlanta and came here, and I have no intention of leaving.
It's a great city. I had so much fun up there in the boating community, and that's really my retirement dream, is to buy another boat and cruise the inland lakes and waters.
That's great. That's great. Go for it.
Well, I will. I'll get there. I have no doubts.
Good for you.
Every day is a new adventure and a new life, and really good stuff. Also, your tagline, "The Power of Presence." Very good stuff, and I appreciate the impact that you're making and helping folks like me and my clients make the most of what they have.
Thank you so much.
Well, before we let you go, Dr. Kertay, is there anything else you'd like to leave us with? Anything that we didn't touch on yet that you really wanted to make sure that our audience understood in terms of how they can help implement seeding greatness in their lives today?
I would say that the simplest thing that anybody can learn to do is, there's a way in which the idea of mindfulness has become, it's become less meaningful because I think it's become a buzzword. But really what it's about is just learning to sit with yourself and be present. And, often the training starts with just learning to pay attention to your breathing and keeping your focus on it. I would just urge people to sit down for 5 minutes and see if you can keep your mind focused on one thing. And what you're going to find is that that's a lot harder than you think it is. But learning that is the first step to being able to show up for yourself and for other people. And I think that's the most important thing that I could say for starters.
Oh, that's very powerful. That sounds kind of like meditating. Are you recommending that we meditate, or is it a little bit different than that?
No, it really is a form of meditation. I mean, it's a 2,500-year-old form of meditation, but I sometimes hesitate to use that word. I meditate. I sometimes hesitate to use the word because that carries meanings for people as if you have to, as if it's in conflict with your, science-based belief system or in conflict with your religion. And it doesn't have to be. You just have to be able to be in your own skin, whatever that means. So yes, I do recommend meditation. Whether you call it that or not is totally up to you.
I hear you. And I do meditate every day. I'd say I meditate every day, but I feel more like I work on it. I try. Yeah. I find it difficult, but I know that
means you're doing it right, by the way.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good then. That's good to know. Well, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Chattanooga, Tennessee today. And really appreciate it. So continue seeding greatness. And we look forward to seeing you around our community as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness, it's such inspiring people. And Dr. Kertay was talking about people being comfortable in their own skin. And certainly our next guest, she definitely is the epitome of that. And she's a longtime friend of mine from Atlanta, Georgia. She's a huge animal lover like I am, and like so many of our folks at TEDxDupreePark are. She's a little bit of nerd in her. She's answered yes to a lot of those questions. If you're a nerd, if you're an animal lover, then you are definitely going to love Sandy Weaver. She's an author, speaker, citizen scientist in the areas of neuroplasticity, neurology, and positive psychology. She's a self-proclaimed bossy big sister to two wonderful brothers. She works with veterinary hospital teams to implement or improve the hospital well-being programs because those in the veterinary field have a lot of stress, much more than average. and they're much less able to manage that stress. So when she's not creating training programs, facilitating mastermind coaching programs, or consulting with veterinary hospital management teams, she's spoiling a very old Siberian Husky and training a very young one that I love watching on Facebook, by the way. So please welcome from Atlanta, Georgia, author, speaker, and queen of the dog cookies, Sandy Weaver. Hang on just a second. Let me pull you in, Sandy. There we go.
Hi,
Sandy,
Gina.
thank you. Thank you for taking time away from those beautiful dogs to spend a little time with us today.
Thank you for the invitation, and my, what illustrious company I'm in. So I'm very honored, and thank you so much to Dr. Kertay for his words about meditation. So important. And Gina, he is right when he says, if it's difficult, you're probably doing it right. Don't sit there and try to do it, but just be quiet. Our brains are such time travelers. We think that time travel is not possible, but it's what our brains do all the time. They go backwards and worry about things that happened, and they go forwards and worry about things that are about to happen, and they quit being here. And so meditation is about being here and being quiet for 5 to 7 to 15 minutes, whatever you can carve out of your day. And he's exactly right. It is so beneficial in so many ways.
Is that one of the things that you teach these veterinary hospital management teams? Why don't
Yes,
you tell
ma'am.
us a little bit more about the important work that you're doing there?
Most people think that veterinarians have a dream job because they get to work with animals all day. And that's what they wanted to do. And that's what they went to school to do. Veterinarians, I'll give you, let's see, the short version on a veterinarian, who they are. And I'm painting with a broad brush, but it is a fairly accurate brush. Veterinarians are deep in the nerd zone. They tend to be, like Mike said that he was a left-brained introvert. They tend to be left-brained introverts. It's much more difficult to get into veterinary school than it is to get into medical school, because there are many fewer veterinary schools than there are med schools, and there are just about as many people who want to be veterinarians. So it's more difficult to get in, and people usually decide they're going to be a veterinarian when they're 10 or 11 or 12 years old, which means from that point of their life until they apply to medical school or veterinary schools, they are focused on being a straight A student. They are focusing all of their extracurricular activities and all of their summer activities on doing things that are going to look good on their application for veterinary school so that they can get into veterinary school. And then they get into veterinary school and they're in there, most of them on student loans. So when they come out of 8 years of the school that it takes to become a veterinarian, many of them have $500,000 in student loan debt. And then they come out of veterinary school looking forward to treating animals. And what they're doing is managing a hospital and managing staff and worrying about how they're going to pay all those student loans down and worrying about how they're going to pay all of their staff. And so when they're 5, 6, 7 years in, they can often be extremely stressed. And so there's a huge problem with suicide in the veterinary industry. We touched on it briefly early. Steve talked about that we were going to talk about a suicide problem. The CDC, Centers for Disease Control, did a longitudinal study looking at veterinary deaths. And what they found was that what people had known anecdotally over the years is actually true. Veterinarians have a far higher suicide rate than the rest of the general population. Male veterinarians 2.1 times more likely to complete a suicide, and female veterinarians 3.5 times more likely to complete a suicide. So when that report came out early last year, I looked at it and just completely retooled my business. And I said, you know, what I work with people on is useful to everybody. These people are people I love. They take care of animals and I love animals and they need help. And so that's when I morphed my business and really, really focused on working in the veterinary industry, working with veterinarians and their teams. And Stephen, I love that picture that's over your shoulder. I'm going to find out where you live and I'm going to come get it.
Yeah, it's a picture of, it's actually a wolf, but it looks like a Samoyed.
It does, yeah.
So it's kind of a cross, but you know, I love that we've got someone on that loves animals. I mean, I'm just a dog lover. I remember when we went to look at where we were going to have a venue, and we were looking at the Arts Center downtown Woodstock.
Mhm.
And the lady that handled everything for the city, she came in and she ran up to me and said, "Oh, it's the dog guy." And I had never had someone call me the dog man before. But you know what? I was so flattered because I unabashedly love animals.
Yeah.
We all have the stories of it. Do you know Dr. Michael Good?
I do know Dr. Michael Good. I've known him for a very long time.
Yeah, he is a good friend. He is going to be one of our speakers. Actually, I'll be taking my dog to him in a couple weeks.
Okay.
But he is the opposite of so many. He got into it for the same reason. When he was a kid, he was around animals. The father wasn't there. And so animals were his life. And that was the same with me. I had a problem with my father, but I always had that unconditional love for my dog. And that kind of shaped my future. But if you know him, he is a bigger than life guy.
He really is. Yes.
Yeah, he is. I mean, he does so much. He works 24/7, like many vets. And the only one thing I wanted to just point out, and then because I have some questions, but we have another speaker, Colleen Patrick Goudreau, and she is in compassionate eating and living. And she talks about animals. And I was just watching one of her videos. And, we say derogatory, well, that's an animal, or you're an animal, or, this. And it shouldn't be that way, because she points it out that we are both beings. There's human beings and there's animal beings. And the word animal is actually a virtuous, beautiful word. It comes from the root anima, and anima is breath of life.
Right.
It's breath of life and love. Right. And that's what they are. I have this strange belief, but maybe not with animal lovers, that they may be superior to us and we just don't know it. And they're so smart, they're not even telling us.
I think you might be right, Stephen. I think you might be right.
They just, when we would rescue them and put them into a new home, they would forget everything that happened. And they would, as our previous doctor was talking about, they would be in the moment instantly.
Yeah.
Wherever they were fine. There's just so much we could learn from them. It's just quite amazing. But let me go back now to the suicide. I've heard that. It came up a few weeks ago on one of our shows. And I thought, could the suicide have anything to do with them having to euthanize so many animals?
Ooh, let's talk about neuroplasticity, shall we? Because I think what you have touched on right there, Stephen, is probably the last tumbler that falls in the suicide equation. So suicide, if you've studied it at all, suicide is like putting a key into a very complex lock. All the tumblers have to turn at exactly the same time in order for the suicide to be completed. So it's not one thing. It's a preponderance of things. It's sort of like if you know anything about human allergies. Allergy is not just a response to one thing. It's the body piling up challenges to the immune system or to the histamine system, whatever it's called. And then all of a sudden one thing tips you over. So you think that's what you're allergic to. No, you're allergic to everything underneath too. It's the same thing with suicide. It's all the stresses that pile up and the personality that doesn't know how to deal with them. Veterinarians tend to be introverted, very, very tough on themselves, perfectionists. They have a very hard time asking for help. They feel like they should be able to do it all themselves. And they're not really good at expressing their own feelings. So when you have those personality traits, stressed, they can stress themselves into a corner very quickly. They don't understand that there's a way out. Now let's talk about neuroplasticity. The way the brain works is when you have a thought, two synapses that are in pretty close proximity open up and they fire little messenger packets at each other. And when the packets touch, That's when the thought occurs. Then immediately the packets start going back into their individual synapses and the synapses close. But there are a couple of little straggler packets that end up stuck between those two synapses. The next time the same thought occurs, lather, rinse, repeat, it opens, they shoot, they close, most of the packages go away, but now there's a few more. So when you have the same thought over and over and over and over again, it stops being a thought and it becomes a belief. It becomes something that almost feels like it thinks you. So with that as the background, let's talk about veterinarians who, on an average of 2 times a week, counsel a client on what a gift it is to give their aging or very ill pet release from pain and suffering. So they say that on average 104 times a year. They say it out loud to another human being, which means they hear it an average of 104 times a year. How many times do they think it inside their head in order to rationalize putting the animals down, in order to make themselves feel better and compartmentalize that piece of their job that has got to be really hard? Those synapses are connected by a bridge. Well, scientists call it a tunnel. I don't like to think about tunnels in the brain, but that they call it a tunnel. That makes me think about the pictures of meth people, the brains of meth people. So I don't like to use that phrase, but the synapses are connected. The bridge is made. And so they believe that there's an end to pain and suffering, and it is a gift, and it is a last perfect gift that you can give to someone who's in pain and who is suffering. And so fast forward to when the veterinarian themselves is the one feeling pain and suffering. What's the belief they have in their head? That they can end it, and it's a gift. And I believe that probably is the single most damaging thing and probably drives a suicide rate, because I think it's the last tumbler that falls.
Wow. I figured there has to be some, they love animals, they're human beings, and yet they have the highest suicide rate. That's powerful, the connection of that.
Yeah.
It's that final thing that allows them to feel good about letting their own life go.
Right. And I see that Mike's popped in. I want to mention something that Dr. Kertay talked about. He talked about helping people morph from their corporate life, like you did, Steve, into something that really feeds your soul. And what I heard him say was something that I think veterinarians have a hard time with and can be helped with: the external definition of success versus your internal definition of success. For their entire life, from the 10, 11, 12, from when they first wanted to be a veterinarian, they had to produce the external definition of success. And now finally they're a veterinarian and they're doing what they thought they wanted to do their whole life, and it turns out to be a little different than they thought it was going to be. They have a hard time getting to the internal part of it, the part that made them love the profession in the first place. Not all of them, certainly not all of them, but a large majority of them. No, not majority, a large number of them have a problem with that. So I think looking at the external definition of success versus the internal driver of success is really where we can make a difference. And that's how I work with veterinarians and their teams. I bring them back to, hey, we're here, we're right here, we're right now. Let's talk about what's important. Let's talk about how we work together. Let's talk about how y'all work together and you think about what you do. Because all it takes is just a little tweak in your thought process. That's it. Okay, Mike, sorry, I stole your time.
No, this is fascinating stuff. I got to tell you, Sandy, finally we get to at least meet online. We share many mutual friends. We've been friends on Facebook for a good while.
Yeah.
And what powerful stuff. I can't begin to tell you. I never really put together the notion of euthanasia with how that's another tumbler in their particular lock system. It's impactful to me. And I thank you so much for what you're doing. And hopefully we'll get to meet at some point in time in person. One question I do have is, why Huskies?
Oh my God.
I have a friend that has a Husky. And you two are so loyal to those dogs and vice versa.
I have wanted Siberian Huskies since I was a kid. And I'm a big root for the underdog. And so, Red Riding Hood and the Big Bad Wolf, I never understood why the Big Bad Wolf was the Big Bad Wolf. And he's so beautiful. And so I growing up, I always was like, pulling for the wolves. I want the wolves to win one. They're not as bad as everybody thinks they are. Because, you know, I tilt at windmills sometimes. But I was smart enough to know that wolves are terrible pets. You cannot take a wild animal and turn it into a pet. That's just cruel because it's not who they are. So I started looking around and I said, what's a breed that looks like a wolf? And there were two of them. Alaskan Malamutes and Siberian Huskies look very wolfy. And so I thought, oh, I'm going to have one or the other, one or the other. And my dad always said, when you have a place of your own, you can have whatever kind of dog you want, but we are not having anything that big. So I got my first place when I was 19 and my first Siberian when I was 19. And that's a long dang time ago. And the reason Siberians won out over Alaskan Malamutes is that in an emergency, I can pick a Siberian up. They only weigh about 40, 45 pounds versus an Alaskan Malamute, 80 to 120. So it's like, okay, in an emergency, I can pick up a Siberian. So that's why Siberians, because they look like wolves. They're lots of fun. I love their sense of humor and their personality. And I don't care if they shed. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me.
Well, good for you, because they are shedding factories.
They are.
But they are beautiful dogs. I love the eyes, and the temperament is above average in many dog breeds. So
Fun.
I was kind of curious about that. And I'd never really had entered my lexicon, so to speak, growing up. Most of the dogs I had as a kid were mutts. And then we ended up with a few rescues in my own family.
That's what we had to. But can I change your languaging around mutts? They're AKC. I'm stealing this from the author and humorist Dave Barry. They are not mutts. They are AKC, all kinds combined.
All kinds combined. Yep. Well said. And thank you so much. I really have enjoyed finally getting to at least see you on TEDxDupreeParkTV. Hopefully we'll get to meet in person sometime. Thanks for what you do, and what a marvelous presentation.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much, Sandy, for being on. You know, before I let you go, just a quick, we see so many videos on YouTube and Facebook with Huskies. They sound so much, their voices are so much like human voices. Is this something special about Husky anatomy that allows them to sound like that?
Not that I know of, but they talk more than they bark, but they're really good mimics. So they do mimic. If you have a Siberian that grows up next door to a hound, then they're going to bark like the hound. They're going to sound like the hound. But if they just grow up all together, they're going to sound much more like coyotes or wolves. They talk more. So there's vocalizations and less barking. And I think that's just because they were an isolated breed when they were developed by the Chukchi people in Siberia. I mean, that really is where they came from. So they were isolated. They were out there yipping around with whatever the wild canids were there.
Oh my. Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for sharing that. Well, thank you so much for being on, and thank you for the work you do. And my heart just goes out to the veterinarians and their teams. It's rewarding work that they do, and it's also simultaneously so very difficult in so many ways. So thank you, Sandy, for making their lives better. And thank you for joining us here on TEDxDupreeParkTV.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's been an honor and a pleasure.
Okay, so where can folks find you?
I'm all over all the socials. Most of my socials are Sandy J. Weaver, because Sandy Weaver was already taken by some other person with a great name. So I put my middle initial in there. And if I can say this, if anything I said makes you want to understand veterinarians a little deeper and understand what the stresses are and how you can be a part to fix it, I just finished writing that book. Literally, I finished writing that book on Monday. The editor is finished with it. She's kicked it back to me. I'm working with a person on the title, and it is ready for pre-purchase. So if you would like to pre-purchase the book, there will be bonuses involved. I don't know exactly what they all are yet, but there will be bonuses for people who pre-purchase. It's on my website in my Success Tools store. So it's centerforworkplacehappiness.com/store. And the book is called The Care and Feeding of Your Veterinarian. And it's available for pre-purchase, and 50% of what people pay for the book is going to an organization called Not One More Vet Incorporated. And they work with at-risk veterinarians to help make sure that they don't take that last step and don't let that last tumbler turn. their work.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for this wonderful work and for all that you're doing. We look forward to having you back in the future and continuing to involve you in our TEDx Dupree Park TV community.
And congratulations on your TEDx Dupree Park. However you get it launched, I know you're doing a virtual coming up very soon and a live as soon as you can. And I know you're going to knock it out of the park because I know you, Gina. You do stuff right.
Thank you so much, Sandy. All right, you take care.
You too.
All right, so let's bring Mike and Steve back in to wrap things up here. Mike, I hear you have some news for us. Woodstock, the home of TEDx Dupree Park, just received some world-renowned recognition. You want to share that with us?
I'd love to, and yes, indeed. Money Magazine has named the city of Woodstock the 17th best small town to live in America. It's a huge deal. Woodstock in Cherokee County is just a terrific place to be. We just started fall, and I got to tell you, for those that don't know, there's really no finer place for fall than North Georgia. So come visit Woodstock. There's lots to see and do, and we'll blow the doors off of Woodstock, online, virtual, in person.
Well, Woodstock is a wonderful place, and so many of our sponsors for TEDx Dupree Park are based in Woodstock. Some are not. They have a global audience, and they recognize that TEDx Dupree Park has a global audience as well. And so some of our sponsors are based all over. But yes, not much more gorgeous than the beautiful mountains of North Georgia as fall sets in, and the oranges and leaves and all the beautiful, not oranges, orange leaves. And I'm in Florida now, so I'm thinking of oranges, but orange leaves. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, Steve, any final words you'd like to share with us as we head off for the weekend?
It was a really good show. The three of us are having so much fun doing this, meeting people. And as Dr. Orsini said, you get to meet really good people. And with the TED brand, we're able to invite the really top people in their field. And it's just so wonderful. One thing, I've heard of Sandy Weaver's name, but I hadn't met her. I want to buy about a dozen copies of her books through my nonprofit Green Pets, and I want to take them around to all the veterinarians in Woodstock because I think it would be really beneficial to them. So if you can hook me up with her, Gina, I don't remember what her email was, but I'd like to buy at least a dozen books and personally, even with a mask, take them around because it's so important that we can help them because they're helping animals.
Well, great idea. I love it. I love all the spreading the wisdom, spreading the good news. There's so many wonderful veterinarians there in Woodstock. Over my years of being in Cherokee County, I think I dealt with most all of them. There's some wonderful people in that world. So I do want to recognize Julie Donnelly, who's posted today. She's out in our audience. She's one of our TEDx speakers. And as far as I know, she's the first one that's actually fully recorded her TEDx for our virtual TEDx, which is going to be broadcast on December 5th and 6th. And so Julie broadcast, she recorded it yesterday, and I've heard that it's just fantastic. I can't wait to see it. And Julie, we're giving you big applause out here for doing that. Thank you. She'll be helping people release their pain. There's a lot of different kinds of pain in the world, a lot of mental pain, a lot of physical pain. Julie focuses on most of the physical pain, which eliminates a lot of mental pain. When people have physical pain, there's a lot of mental pain that goes along with that. So, so Julie says, yay, yes, she's done. She's done. It's going to be wonderful. All right, well, let's let folks get off to their Friday afternoon or whatever it is that they're doing when they're watching this. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Dr. Kertay, Dr. Orsini, Sandy Weaver, and Marcey Walsh for being our producer. Thank you, Marcey. I'm sure she was really excited hearing all of this neuroplasticity talk because that's a big part of what she focuses on as well, the neuroplasticity and neuroscience. She's into the brain work as well when she's not helping us here on TEDx Dupree Park. And let's see, also, I'd like to say thank you to Randy Stukes He helps get everyone coordinated and registered and all signed up so they know where to be on our show. And then, of course, John Cloonan and our social media team is doing a great job of getting the word out about our shows each week. So, and there's more people behind the scenes, but those are the three main team members that are involved in our program. So thank you, everybody. And we will see you guys around the web and around social media and sometimes in Woodstock even. Take care.
Bye-bye.